The call came late in the afternoon, just as Mickey Haller was settling into the rhythm of another routine day as a defense attorney. It wasn't often that the district attorney's office reached out to him, not with an offer, at least. Yet here they were, asking him to step over the line, to switch sides, to become a special prosecutor in a case that had the entire city watching. Jason Jessup. The name alone sent a ripple of unease through the legal world. Convicted of the brutal murder of a 12-year-old girl more than 24 years ago, Jessup had spent decades behind bars, proclaiming his innocence. Now, new DNA evidence had cast doubt on the original conviction. The courts had overturned the verdict. Jessup was walking free, awaiting a new trial. The DA's office needed someone who could win the case. Someone who knew how defense attorneys thought, who could anticipate every trick and counter it before it took root. Mickey Haller was that person. He hesitated. Prosecuting wasn't his game. But there was something about Jessup, something that didn't sit right. The man had spent 2 decades painting himself as a wrongfully convicted martyr, but Mickey wasn't convinced. Some convictions were overturned on technicalities, not innocence. And if Jessup wasn't innocent, then a dangerous man was about to be unleashed on the world again. He accepted. But if he was going to prosecute, he needed the best investigator he could get. That meant Harry Bosch. Bosch had spent his entire career hunting down the worst criminals in Los Angeles. He knew how to find the cracks in a story, how to chase down the details that others missed. If Jessup was guilty, Bosch would find the proof. The first thing Mickey did was review the old case files. The original prosecutor had been confident, too confident. The case had relied on eyewitness testimony from the victim's sister, Sarah Gleason, who had been just 13 at the time. But no physical evidence had ever directly tied Jessup to the crime. And now, years later, Sarah was a different person, scarred, untrusting, unwilling to relive the past. Convincing her to testify again would be an uphill battle. Meanwhile, Jessup was already playing his part in the public eye. He paraded himself before the cameras, thanking the justice system for finally seeing the truth. He had powerful supporters, defense lawyers, activists, even journalists who had spent years championing his cause. He wasn't just fighting for his freedom. He was playing for public sympathy. Bosch, however, had other concerns. The DNA that had overturned the conviction? It belonged to Sarah Gleason's stepfather, a man who had died years ago. That didn't clear Jessup. It only muddied the waters. And when Bosch started digging into Jessup's life behind bars, he found troubling reports, stories of a man who was patient, manipulative, and quietly dangerous. Then Jessup did something that sent a chill through both men. He began following young girls. It was subtle, never enough to get arrested, but enough to be noticed. He was seen at parks, near schools, always watching, always waiting. Mickey and Bosch knew what it meant. Jessup wasn't innocent. He had been locked away before he could hurt again, and now, after 24 years, he was back in the world, searching for his next victim. The urgency grew. Mickey pushed Sarah to testify, knowing she was their strongest link to the past. She resisted at first, angry, terrified, but in the end, she agreed. She wouldn't let Jessup erase what had happened. The trial began, and as expected, the defense tore into the old case. They painted Sarah as an unreliable witness, manipulated by police and prosecutors. They questioned every gap, every inconsistency in the original investigation. Mickey countered with logic, with experience, with the truth of what kind of man Jessup was. He presented his case carefully, methodically. But then something happened that changed everything. Sarah Gleason disappeared. She had been placed in protective custody, but somehow, Jessup's people had gotten to her. Whether it was fear, coercion, or worse, she was gone. Without her, the case was crumbling. Bosch went on the hunt. He followed every lead, chased every whisper, and finally, he found her. Alive, but terrified. She had been warned, stay quiet, disappear, or suffer the consequences. Bosch wasn't having it. He got her back. Sarah testified. She stood in front of the court and told them what she saw all those years ago. She faced Jessup and didn't flinch. The jury listened. In the end, Justice wasn't a question of technicalities or overturned verdicts. It was about the truth. And the truth was that Jason Jessup had killed a 12-year-old girl. The jury found him guilty. But Jessup wasn't done fighting. That night, as he was being transported back to jail, he made his move. A desperate man with nothing to lose, he overpowered his guards, escaped into the city, and vanished. Bosch knew how this would end. He tracked Jessup to an abandoned lot, a place where the shadows ran deep. The two men faced each other, predator and hunter. Jessup had a gun, but Bosch had something stronger, years of knowing how this would play out. The fight was brief. A shot rang out. Jessup fell. In the aftermath, Mickey and Bosch stood on opposite sides of the law again. One a defense attorney, one a detective. But for that moment, they were the same, men who had seen justice served, in a courtroom and outside of it. And for that moment, that was enough.